Okay, so just to go through that warm up really quick, again, when you're setting up, we want that narrower stance, right? We don't want a wide squat stance, more like an RDL type stance. And then from here, hands are just outside the thighs. Okay, so to get into the hang position is basically like an RDL, just a little bit of a softer knee position, and then just dropping, usually right around the knees or just above the knees. So I would start out with 5 of those, just to get that set position and then come back up. Okay, so we'll do 5 there. Actually, I think I missed one too. Okay, I actually put it in the wrong order. Okay, so then what we do is we go down into our start position and we go into a pull shrug or a shrug pull. So where we come up and get used to pulling with a straight arm. Okay, so the third one I actually wrote incorrectly. I don't usually do a high pull as a warm-up. Okay, I usually work on the pull into the front rack. So what I do with this one is we want the bar to travel straight up. So what we do actually here is we rotate the shoulders forward so the elbows come out, and then with a quick motion, we flick the bar up into that front rack position. So we're trying to create that bar path straight up the body and trying to catch it on the fingertips so those elbows shoot forwards, okay? Because the only thing with the high pull, and again, like I said, with athletes that are stronger, they're just gonna upright row it, they're gonna keep it in their palm, right? And their elbows are gonna stay down. So we want to work on that rotation here and kind of a quicker motion. So then once the bar's up in the front rack position, what we're going to do is we're going to set our feet more into our catch position, which is like a front squat, and then we just work the front squat. Try to keep the bar on the fingertips as best as we can. Okay? Usually from here, after we're done, okay, I might give the athletes a little bit of a rest, just to rest their forearms a little bit. But then what we do is we bring the bar back up in that front rack position, and we close our feet back to our start position. Because now what we're going to do is a front squat drop, where we're practicing catching it with the feet more open, okay, and trying to just drop into that quick catch position. I try and get them to just get used to dropping, but again, not necessarily acid grasp, but like trying to decelerate to get up that position. Just because we're not usually training them like an Olympic weightlifter, right? But I don't want them just to be super rigid there. So then what we do is we do it all together with a little bit of a pause in a few positions. So then we'll come down, we'll set our hang position, we'll pause, we'll come up into our shrug pull, pause, and then from here, we drop, learning how to catch the bar kind of at that high or at that lower height. So we pause, drop. So again, use that for warm up to kind of go through the different sections, okay, of that movement. Okay? Now, where do we go from here? Right? Like what do we want to do with our athletes? We've given them some of the parts, or we've given them all the parts of it. How do we put it together? Okay? So one thing that I started doing is I've been doing muscle cleans. So again, what this does though is it kind of takes away, obviously, the power of the movement. It takes away the drop. But all a muscle clean is from that hang position. It's just taking the bar path through the system that we need to, okay? Here, so from the hang, learning how to keep the bar close to the body, coming up, and then bringing it into that front rack position. And again, even with weight on it, you'll see a little bit of added speed, obviously, because we can't really just reverse curl it from here. So what we'll do is get that movement a little bit quicker. But what I find from here is that we're pulling from the proper position. Because sometimes when we go right into a hang clean, is our athletes will pull right from the knees. Then their bar path is out here, right? And then what happens when the bar path is there, they catch on their toes, they start stepping forwards. What the muscle clean allows us to do is actually pull from here and come straight up, okay? And that, again, was probably historically my biggest error, was trying to get an athlete to pull from here and do their explosive movement where the bar's out, right? And I'm sure some of you have seen that as well. And what we forget is this is the position that we need to pull from, okay? So if you guys just put the bar down, take a step away from it, okay? Pretend you have dumbbells in your hand to do a squat jump. Okay? Where's your weight coming through? Here. Your weight's here. You're not doing a squat jump with the weights out there. Right? If you have the barbell on your shoulders and you're doing the squat jump, where's the bar? It's over top, okay, of the top part of the thighs. So why are we teaching our athletes how to hang clean, okay, and pull from this part of our body, right? We need to be able to get the bar here, okay? And now if you look where my torso is. So what's the other problem about pulling hard from this position? This, right? Is you're overextending the back, you're throwing your shoulders into it. Again, the bar's gonna end up out here. If we can get the timing of getting the bar over our mid-thigh, now my shoulders are straight up and down, I can actually vertically drive, okay, straight up. The bar will be right where it needs to be, right in front of my body. So now I'm sending all that momentum straight up. That's the hard part to teach, right? Because when an athlete has a bar, they want to rip that thing right off, right? They want to come from here and throw it into themselves, okay? And that's where I had all of that pain, right? Why am I sore after cleaning? I shouldn't be, right? There's people that are cleaning 150 kilos, right? They can walk the next day, okay? So those kind of things, okay, are things that I wasn't taught right off the start, okay? Because I didn't have a weightlifting coach teaching me how to do this, right? So the hard part, whether you're going from the ground or from your knees, okay, to be able to get the bar to here and then go. I'm not saying there's no speed involved in it, right? Like we can still pull the hang movement. We can still pull it to here with some velocity. Okay, it doesn't have to be slow drive. Okay, we can still get here and then explode up. Okay? But how do we get the athlete to understand that? That's an open question. What are some different training things that we can do there?
I start with a dumbbell. Let's go through all this. I get a dumbbell in their hands, then they can keep it more centered on them. Like when you're talking about a dumbbell, we can start to work on that naturally clean or whatever. Work on the timing of all that stuff. Then bring the barbell back, and then they're already used to using their legs more. Not trying to pull with their head.
Okay. Does anyone use anything else? Okay. Okay. Pick up the bar. Okay. So here's some things with the barbell that you can use. Right there. High, mid-thigh. Okay? Try it. Just a mid-thigh, high-thigh pull. Okay? So, again, going to dumbbells is great. Some people have a hard transition. They can do everything with a dumbbell. You put a barbell back in their hands, okay? And now all they want to do is do this. They just want to rip the barbell, right? So again, I'm not saying that those things aren't good, but if your end goal is to use a barbell, let's try and find some other things that we can do with a barbell, okay? You want to grab 2 10s and some flips, put them on your bar. Okay, so we can do this with 18-inch blocks if you want to be closer to mid-thigh. Okay, so that helps. So this is more in your hang position. Okay, so to create some, to create less like bounce with the bar, if you find that your athletes, okay, are here, and then trying to create more, you go from a completely stationary position, you can come up. Trying to get that vertical pull. Because even like on an 18-inch blocks, you would be more at thigh height here, mid-thigh height, where now you can work on that vertical pull. And then that's all you're getting them to do, is this thing going vertical. Okay? So by adding height underneath the bar, okay, those kind of things are good training mechanisms that you can throw in there, okay? So, the other thing too is, I think some of you have been taught that we want to jump with the bar, okay? We want to think about jumping when we're pulling. What's the only problem with that? Sorry? Well, no, the thing is, the heavier you get, the more you can actually jump with it. But when you're at the start of teaching an athlete to clean when we're using lighter weight, what's the problem with jumping with it? Yeah, and then what happens to the bar? The bar floats, right? Because they can jump with that. Right? I'm not saying it's a bad thing because you might get that extension in the hips. But remember, where are we pulling or where are we wanting to pull the bar from? We want to pull from that mid to high thigh height. Well, that's where our big pull is, right? foot. Mid-foot, even the heel, right? So one Olympic weightlifting coach showed us, let's do a heel jump. Let's do a jump off of our heels and see what happens. So I want you guys to go down, okay, even just a quarter squat position, and I want you to think about jumping as high as you can off your heels.
Double extension.
What happens? Yeah, but what happens to your hips? Oh, when you're in the air, jump off your heels from there. Jump off your heels from there. If you're doing it properly, you guys are thinking about it too much. If you're actually jumping off your heels as high as you can, you're going to extend your hips. And the other thing is you're not going to float as much because you can't go as high. You're so rigid right now, you're thinking about it. You're not even moving your hips to try and get more explosiveness. Okay? If you just jump freely, but jump off your heels, you're going to extend the hips. Okay? More naturally, okay? You're not going to come off the ground as high, right? Because a high jump's a normal jump. Okay? Jump a normal jump. Okay? Now jump a heel jump. It doesn't jump as high, which is going to allow him to come down on the ground a little bit quicker, right? So you take away the floating aspect of it, you actually get the hip extension, because one thing that I went over is a lot of athletes will go from here to here because they're forwards, they want to get the bar into their front squat position, so they'll forget about this. But if we can get that bar to mid-high height, explode off the mid-foot heel, that athlete's still going to be able to generate a lot of power, okay, a lot of quickness, and be even faster to get down into their pec. Right? Okay? I heard you say double extension. Okay? The triple extension it's one of those kind of things that's been around for many, many, many years. So everyone talks, we need to get triple extension, we need to get triple extension. The problem with that is that you're thinking about your ankles too much, right? You're gonna end up pushing off your toes at some point, okay? That's just the way we explode, that's the way we move, okay? That's not the number one goal. The number one goal is to extend and extend. Naturally, when you're here, you're just gonna go into the tiptoes. So double extension is essentially what we're after. Because you're not going to keep everything, you're not going to keep your ankle completely at dorsiflexion when you're here. It's not natural to do that unless you're overthinking it a little bit, right? You're gonna naturally at some point, once you get to here, you're gonna end up pushing off the toe. That third extension will come, but I try not to think about it too much or teach it too much, because then that's when you get the athletes thinking more weight on the toes and jump from there, and it throws off their timing. So if you can concentrate on their hips, the knees will follow, the ankles will naturally follow after that. Okay? So I try not to use that term anymore because I find it's too much. We're already giving them so much information that it is kind of challenging. Okay? So if you guys want to just use the bar that you have, okay? I want you to see if you can go from your hang, okay, and then try and be more natural into that mid-thigh. You can do a couple where you're maybe a little bit slower, set, and then go into that, and then try and do some a little bit more full speed where the pull is still from mid to high thigh. Okay, you're pulling right kind of from the front of the knee. Try and pull back to that mid thigh. You're just overthinking it. You're pretty rigid on that. Okay?
You want me to think about like the heel jump?
Nope, I don't. I want you to think about extending your hips, pulling from that mid thigh. Okay? That's what I want you thinking about. If the bar is where it's supposed to be, your weight will naturally be on that mid foot back to your heel a little bit. Right? Okay? So again, you mentioned before it's hard to jump really high with a heavy weight. But again, once we get to those heavier weights, it does become more of an actual jump in a sense. Okay? And then that's where that triple extension becomes more important, because part of the reason that we need to get our heels up is because we still need to be able to get our heels down. Right? So that's what the weight kind of helps a little bit. The weight almost pulls us off the ground a little bit. So once we get that pull from here, that weight's pushing into our body, like into our arms, it's gonna pull us off, but then we still need to try and secure those feet on the ground. Okay? But the thing is when you're coaching these movements, when's the right time to teach the stomp? When's the right way to teach any of these aspects, right? Because am I going to throw my athletes' timing off by just teaching them how, hey, after your pull, I want you to stomp. Well, what's that going to do to some athletes? They're going to forget about their hips, right? Because all they want to do is get the bar off their shoulders and now stomp their feet, and you've lost that extension, okay? So if we can limit the amount of things, right, that we want to teach our athletes and focus on something. Okay, Tanisha, you're catching on your forefoot a little bit too much, okay? Your hip extension's great. Now what you want to try and do is secure those heels onto the ground. So you've got a good pull, you're just catching a little bit forward. Okay, great. She's got the hips down, okay? So I don't have to worry about that as much. Now, because she's here, we can try and secure her on the floor a little bit more. But if I would have taught you too early, hey, you're way forward on your catch, hit your heels on the ground, we might not get that hip extension back for another week or two. Okay? So timing of the coaching, again, it's going to be athlete dependent, obviously, but at the same time, did they check one or two or three of the boxes that you're trying to get? Okay? Now you can move to the next one. Now you can move to the next one. It's like anything else, right? It's like anything else you teach, any other sport that you're teaching. You probably notice this with skills, some through air. Oh shoot, I taught this, I talked to them about this today and I probably shouldn't. Because now I gotta go back to another aspect, next session, blah, blah, blah. And again, we don't spend a ton of time on this, so that's where it's like, okay, let's teach them these aspects of it, let's teach them these aspects of it, and go from there. Okay? But again, if you can get an athlete to think about that mid-thigh pull, okay, and they're understanding that hip drive through, and they have a good bar path, okay, there's security on the ground might be the next session, even maybe not even that day. Because then they're going to be there thinking, okay, we've got a good start there. Okay? Any questions about that? Have you guys seen anything else? Have you guys been taught anything else? Because some of you guys did your sessions with Shay, right? And Shay, again, he's done some Olympic weightlifting horses before. So again, his information might be different. Is there something that, and I'm looking at you three because I know just recently you guys have done it with Shay. Did you do it? No, you didn't do it, just you two? Has he covered anything else? Because I haven't been able to go to those sessions. So you didn't do any claims with him? Was there any information that you can remember that you went over, both of you, that's different? Pardon? Okay. And that's the thing, is like, I don't think about it until sometimes it's either too late or I see something, right? Because again, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably the biggest error is that we don't get the extension in the hips, right? Like I think that's probably the biggest error, right? Is that explosiveness. And I'm sure none of you have ever done this, but I'm nervous when it comes to this kind of stuff. Try and go find an Olympic weightlifters testing results for like broad jump and vertical jump. You would be absolutely blown away by what some of these people can do. And like I'm talking about a 5'6", 220-pound, either one of them, male or female. They'll have a better vertical jump than all of us. Right? Is this what they do? They're training power, they're training that explosiveness every day. Right? Their vertical jumps, their broad jumps are absolutely through the roof. That's what we want. We want to get there, okay? And the thing is we can still get there without having to put a ton of weight on the bar, okay? If we can just work on their technique, their timing, right? So their power, their coordination of the movement, that's where you're going to see the results athletically. And that's why we're taking this from another sport. Right? You see the numbers what another sport can do. And that's why we try and train. Again, same thing with track and field. Right? You have a 1,500 meter runner that's running a 2-minute and 45-second kilometer. How do they do that? Well, yeah, they train every single day, but their technique is really, really good. So that's why we want to utilize their technique. Even if we're just using it for a short burst, we want to be more efficient. Okay? And that's the whole point of it. And again, like, when it comes down to it, if you think about it from the nuts and bolts of the movement, right? If you don't have the time or the patience to work with athletes and teach them a movement like this, it doesn't seem that complicated, but it is, then let's just do squat jumps with them, right? Because the weight's in the same spot that your bar is going to be when you're driving up. Okay? And that's what I do with offensive and some defensive linemen that just don't have the ability and the wrist to actually catch. Because again, sometimes with those guys too, they can literally just take 200 pounds and just go like that. So they're actually getting less out of it than they would if they had 30 pounds in each hand, okay, and are driving up and then coming down with an extra 60 pounds of the 270 they already have. Are able to decelerate, right? So I love the movement. I think it's beneficial if you have the time, the patience, and the athlete to do it with. Okay? But is there, in the end, is it the movement that they need, or can I just substitute it with something else? Right? We all want to know it. We all want to know how to teach it, because you are going to come across an athlete or a group of athletes that this movement will be beneficial to, that have the ability to understand how to do it and are going to get the positive effects of it. Right? So that's why you all want to know how to do it. Like I said, I wish I had someone that taught me when I was 20 how to do it. Hey, I probably would have been a better football player, okay? But I would have been able to teach it a lot sooner, more properly. Right? And that's what we all want, because then we can take different aspects of it. And that's the fun part, right? Anything else I want to do here? Adaptations. So the one thing I will say though too is with some of the offensive linemen, defensive linemen I work with, some of them still want to use the barbell. They don't want to just do squat jumps. So I might take, 18-inch boxes, 12-inch boxes, sometimes even a 6. I might have like a pyramid on there, and I will get them to do high pulls. Okay? Because I don't train clean with a high pull, I usually train it from the straight arm to the drop. But because those athletes aren't able to curve the wrists, right? I'll have, they'll be on an 18-inch box, pull. Okay, maybe do 2 or 3 there. Now, come here, get it to that mid thigh, pull. Okay, maybe go down lower. I'll also do that with the clean itself. I'll sometimes pyramid them so they get an understanding of pull here. Now we're starting a little bit lower, still pull here, then maybe go down a little bit lower, still pull here to see if they can still hit the timing everywhere. So there's different ways that you can kind of train that. Okay? You want to just throw that bar just from your shoulders, please? Some coaches train, here, so they're getting that hit the mid-thigh, drive the hips up. Again, it might create a little bit more of a lean, depending on, if we can get close enough and still have enough resistance. Okay, so there's different things that you can train with your athletes, depending on what their needs are. Okay? But to go all the way back to the start, doing a single or a double arm dumbbell clean, they're going to be pulling from a better spot. They're still going to get that explosiveness, right? And that's maybe the clean that they have to do, right? And that's okay. You're still giving them a form of power, explosive movement, and that's great. Okay, and that's what we essentially want to be able to do. Okay, some variations that we can do from here. I'm just going to keep using your barbell with that weight on it. I do this more for, I find it easier with some athletes. Because again, with my group of athletes that I train, I don't train cleans with them. I don't find it that beneficial. I'd rather do weighted squat jumps. I use hex bar, do hex bar squat jumps to get that power. But a movement that we will do once in a while, sometimes I'll do this off of 12-inch boxes. So again, I'm at the compound by myself in the morning. I can use everything at my disposal. So I'll have 12-inch box, 12-inch box, 12-inch box, and I'll set up 2 or 3 cages like that. So I'll have everything out. But what I've gone to is like a lunge clean, okay? Because there's, you're still getting the pull, you're still getting the deceleration, and they're decelerating at a higher height. So if I'm on the 12-inch boxes here, I'll get them to drive off of one foot, and as they do that, they're getting that extension in the back hip. You're getting some deceleration. And the bar path is all forwards. Okay, so I'm actually, the difference between this is I'm actually pushing off the ball of my foot rather than the heel. I'm kind of throwing the bar forwards, not up, so I can catch. Because what do they do in their sport? They explode, they have extension of one leg, they're essentially in a deceleration position until they get to the next one. So I'll throw that in just as a variation of power, okay? Again, still something that you can do with dumbbells, or, having a one, you're getting that launch forwards, which is a little bit more of an athletic movement that we would use with a lot of different types of athletes. Okay, so I'll throw that one in there for fun. But I do like to rest it on the boxes, so they're still going from like a completely stationary position, because they will still try to bounce into it. This way, there's nowhere downwards to go. They can only go up and forwards. So that's kind of a variation of a clean that I'll do, because it's more suitable for the athletes that I train, but also kind of the age group of athletes that I train. Right? I don't usually introduce that to them until they're like 16, 17, 18 maybe, because there's still obviously some coordination issues and timing issues, and they're done. So they're trying to put too much weight on them, which will throw all that off. Whereas the older athletes kind of have an understanding of why I'm doing it. They won't try to go too heavy until maybe the third or fourth set, because they've built it up a little bit. Okay? Okay, any questions about the clean at all? Anything that you guys want to chat about there? Okay, I find this much harder to coach than snatch. Okay, you'll know almost right away if an athlete can do a barbell snatch or not. And that's part of the reason that we do the single arm so much. There's so much shoulder, not just strength, but mobility, flexibility that comes in with the snatch. Okay? We're going to go over for the last little bit some of the movements that you can do to see if your athletes can actually do a snatch or not. I feel like you all have a pretty good understanding of the single arm pull. You guys have done it lots, you've seen it lots, you understand that it's just a great, essentially, modification of the Olympic lifts that we can do, that most athletes, even at a younger age, can understand, right? Even if they're just basically doing a muscle overhead snatch to start, okay, and not catching it, the catch might come. Okay, I'll be nice to you guys. We can all use on the water after this one. Michelle, just be careful with some of this. If you want to grab a towel instead of a actual weighted bar, it might be nice around your shoulder. Okay. Okay, so setting up snatch grip. Okay, normally what we would do for this, okay, just so an athlete has an understanding, you usually start about 90 degrees in the elbows. Okay, and then like a lot of things, you can kind of adjust for comfort. I like to be a little bit wider than that. Okay, so I go a touch wider. There are some people that do a narrow grip snatch. Okay, I don't know if have you gone to any narrow grip stuff?
I usually don't. I usually tell the kids the bar should be roughly 6 to 8 inches overhead.
Okay. Okay. I've seen some people do narrow grip. It's more just for the explosiveness of the hips. They're not usually catching it very low because it's hard to do an overhead squat with a narrow grip. You usually have to be a little bit wider. Okay. Again, it's only been a handful of people I've ever seen do it, so I don't usually coach that. Okay, so once we have the barbell, we can do a lot of the same warm-up stuff. Okay, so I won't go through all of that, but there are some other movements that we can do to help train it. So a lot of the times, again, we'll get into that position. We'll actually throw the barbell on the shoulders. So you can even adjust your grip once you're there, okay? The first one that we do is just basically almost like an overhead press, okay? But we do it with a little bit of a pop, just to create some shoulder stability. Right? We just get into that movement, but we're not doing too much of a strength movement there. Okay? You can also go from that movement into an overhead squat to get the understanding. You need to be a little bit wider in your feet, right? You need to create a little bit more space because you can't do a parallel squat with an overhead movement. So we're here, then we'll come down. Where's the balance position that I need to be in? Okay, and then there's a couple different presses that we do. Okay, we can do what's called a snatch balance press, which is really hard, especially with a little bit of a heavier bar. We actually start going down into our squat, and then we press it, so the bar actually stays at a relatively similar height. So if you're watching in the mirror, as you go down, that bar stays almost where it started. Okay, so then you can go into the actual snatch balance, okay, which is very similar to the front squat drop that we did. You can, yeah, you can be a spectator on some of this. Okay, so it kind of teaches us where we need to catch the bar on the deceleration. And then I'll only do this one normally with a lighter bar. I'd like to do this as a warm-up, just because it's a challenge. Okay, and it's called a SOTS press. So what you do is actually go down into a back squat with a wider stance. You hold that. I don't even know if I can do this or not. And you press it from that position. It's awful. Yeah, it is. It's a very challenging strength movement. But what we're trying to do is, can my athlete do a barbell snatch? If they can complete that series of movements, then I would say they're okay. The SOTS press, like I said, is a little bit more challenging. It might not necessarily be, the game breaker that you need to be like, oh yeah, now they can do it for sure. But if they can do that, they're probably strong enough to do it. Okay? So once you've kind of accomplished all that, like I said, the snatch is almost easier in a sense because you're going from your hang or from your ground position, you're getting into that high hip movement or that high hip pull, and then from there, it's just up and down, right? Like I find that there's less coordination, less timing than the clean. So if they have, like I said, if they have the strength overhead to do it, and for a male, the snatch high hip pull is actually a little bit higher than the clean, which keeps certain things out of the way a little bit more, okay? Because I've had some athletes almost castrate themselves doing this movement, okay? So you're almost driving your hips into it, which is closer to the high hip rather than kind of the mid to high thigh area, right? So once you're here, you get that pull, and then it's just about getting that bar in the right spot. And again, coming up is important because if they're throwing it behind them and that momentum's pulling, obviously you're going to put them in a risky position. One of the reasons that we have to question whether or not we're going to do this movement with a non-Olympic weightlifter, right? But from that set position, once you get the bar into the body, okay, now my shoulders are upright, I can drive my hips into the bar, and that bar path should be able to, I should be able to set that almost right over my head. Okay? You just want to give it a couple snaps here. See how it feels. So you're still moving forward just a little bit, right? So you pulled more from like the low part of your thigh. You pulled from right above your knee. That's why the bar went out. There you go. Yeah, get it up a little bit higher. Almost feel it against your legs. You should almost push it off your leg a little bit. Yeah. Do you have anything to throw in here? I know this is something that you're very good at, not just doing, but coaching. Would there be anything else you want to throw in?
Ride your thigh, and you're sorry.
No, sorry,
Your thigh hits the bar, now wide enough. Okay? So that's going to make you punch out too. And then, really simple cues. I like for the snatch, pull, jump, punch. So we're here, arm gets stacked over, we pull, we jump. Some people confuse the hip extension with a kettlebell swing. You're not pushing forward, you're aggressively stacking up. And then pull, jump, punch.
But again, these are things that I watch. Show that again. Look at his feet. Where's his weight? But if you did it slower like you did last time, do it just a little bit slower. Where's his weight again? Yeah, go right up to here. He did one that was a little bit slower. It was perfect because all of his weight was mid to heel of his foot. Right? When you kind of came into that set position, you were here, and you said jump, and you took off almost on the mid-heel part of your foot. Right? And again, that's what we talked about with the clean. Your weight's forward, you're putting yourself in a really, really bad position. That little bit of movement to here, okay, allows you to go straight up, like we talked in the clean. You want to pull vertically, not horizontally. Right? So that little shift in his foot was, again, I saw it great. The way you did it is perfect. So you just like that little rock back, and then he's jumping almost off the heel of his foot. Not totally, but it's there. The weight's back on the mid to heel, and it looked great the way he went straight up.
Two-sided doing ones.
What Dan's talking about too, so if we're here, okay, log coming in, and we're here, that arm gets stacked to the top. A lot of people will start high forward, and then they'll rob themselves back over stack, arm over. A big mistake you make in your first one of these snatch is trying to rush this. Okay, you go like that jet plane taking off, so you slowly pull, and then take right out of that. And then a lot of people, when they rush that, they do that like that Dan mentioned, where you stand